For our event today, I would like to first of all welcome Chef Yasi. Chef Yasi runs Community Food. So food stands for Food Equity with Dignity. And they are heavily involved in the Guelph community. And we are very lucky to have Yasi here today. I have worked on quite a few events now with Yasi, and every time she shares a little bit of wisdom and knowledge with me that has really helped me think about our food system differently. So I'm sure that will happen today, no pressure. But Yasi, how about we just start off? Can you tell us a little bit more about Community Food?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks for having me. It's so nice to be in this beautiful, fancy kitchen. So, Community Food is a food security initiative in Guelph. So, I work alongside a lot of other community groups that do food security group, and this program was designed to basically intercept surplus food that can't be distributed through the channels that already exist, because as we know, there's a lot of waste in food in our food system, but it's not because the food is waste, it ends up wasted because we don't have systems to process that food quickly enough. So when there's a large quantity of food that can't just sort of be taken and then redistributed as it is, that food ends up being wasted because there's a lot of labor involved, as we all know, with cooking any foods that are perishable. Those foods need to be transformed in order for them to be distributed, turned into. So what we do is we work with like the food bank, the seed, other food security groups, and they call us. They're like, hey, we have like half a skid of tomatoes, for example, that we can't distribute because they have like little spots on them, some of them, or it's just too much. And then so our operation is like an industrial catering food operation. So we take those foods and we process them and we turn them into delicious gourmet meals. And then we go out into the community a couple times a week and we serve a hot meal for anyone who wants it. It's available to anyone. The program is sort of geared towards working poor folks on fixed income, students, people who, because food security is not just people who are unhoused. Food security affects people who work full-time, who go to school full-time, or, like our on assistants, and they can't afford to feed themselves, and they still have like time constraints, people who work full-time, who have kids, but can't afford to like order out. So this is sort of providing that convenience option to people. And the other thing that's important about it is that we go out into the community, bring that food to people instead of asking folks who are already struggling to feed themselves to then also travel to access food. So we go to various communities within Guelph that have sort of been identified as having food insecure populations, and we serve there. I've got flyers here. You can check out our website, FEWD.ca, and there's a schedule of where we're at. And so the food is free, but we provide the option of making a donation for the food, because also not everybody wants something for free. And so that's sort of the dignity piece. And the other side is that if you are a person with means who orders takeout, when you go and get the food, then you make a financial donation that's sort of like equivalent to what you would pay for takeout, and that helps a little bit to subsidize our program. And then we also, on the side, we also offer catering services as a way to bring revenue, a little bit of revenue into the program. We are a charity. We accept donations. Please tell all your friends with money. We're looking for donations right now so that we can keep going. We've been operating for almost 2 years now.
Mm-hmm. And you've done so much work in that 2-year period. Just like if you just think about the logistics of trying to source your food, and then where do you cook everything, and then trying to get the community involved and being a part of that is a big effort. So congratulations.
Thank you.
What actually inspired you to start this, if you're willing to
Yeah,
share.
so totally. I think it's great background. So I actually was working at the University of Guelph in the hospitality services in level 0. Chef came by and visited and said hi. And my inspiration came from a chef's conference that I was sent to, where one of the speakers there spoke about sort of the logistical challenges of dealing with surplus foods. And he was coming from Rhode Island, where they have actually outlawed throwing away usable food. And he talked about the logistical nightmare that creates. Because like, while it's great to, oh God, this is doing a thing. Can you just turn it down? I'm the most stressed out about the technology because it's so much fancier than what I'm used to working with. So this chef, he just basically said, he was like, chefs, I need your brains on this. Like, how are we gonna deal with this? Like, yeah, we don't wanna throw food away. Of course we don't want to. And, you know, legislation is one side of it, but the other side is, how do we deal with the practical realities of all this food? We don't have systems in place. Like, the systems that we have in place are like a food bank. So you donate it and then they give the food out, you know? So, and when there's such mass quantities, sort of that being put onto small charities is very challenging. So I just really took that and just sort of ran with it, and was just, you know, it was just in my brain, and I thought about it a lot. And then I thought about how, because the other thing with surplus food is what ends up happening is it also becomes like a storage issue for these charities that are redistributing, right? That you can only put so many things in the freezer, or like turn so many things into like a jam or a sauce, and then you're also then storing that. So really my goal was to think about, like, how do we take this food and then get it into people's stomachs? So this program is designed to do that. And so I kind of think of it as like a Venn diagram, like one of those, the overlapping circles. So the one of them being like food security work, and then the other one being like hospitality services, like restaurants, catering, food services, and then the other one being like care work, taking care of community. So we sort of are in the middle there. So we're doing food security work, but we're operating like a hospitality business. But we are a charity, and ultimately we are creating networks of care and working within the system that already exists, and figuring out how to sort of, I hate the word diversify, but I can't think of another word right now, but, you know, we need to diversify the options for how we deal with surplus food and how we address food security. There's not like a one solution. So, you know, it's about creating a broader network that then can also help to slowly shift our food system out of this wasteful. Yeah,
you're tackling a lot of different, like, systemic
totally
troubles we're having.
Totally.
But you really approach it with like that innovation mindset as well too.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I'm aware of the time, and I know you have a lot you want to show us how to cook as well too. So maybe we'll segue into that a little bit, and then we'll have a conversation throughout. Sure. So what have you brought for us today, and what are you going to demonstrate how to cook?
Oh boy, this is the fun part. This is the part I like. So I'm gonna talk a lot about lentils today, because we're talking about, you know, eating healthy on a budget. So can you turn this off?
Yeah.
Thank you. Lentils, dried lentils they're very healthy. They're high in fiber. Our dietitian can probably tell us all kinds of things that's good about them. And they're also very economical, especially if you buy them dried. And in the North America, like in certain parts of the world, they eat so many lentils. In North America, people are less familiar with the variety of lentils and how to use them. And also because we have so many different cultures in Canada, we actually have all of these different products available. So I'm going to talk a little bit about different lentils and how you can buy them to just like empower you to sort of to get creative and to use them in a way that you wouldn't think about. So one of the things it's already cooking in the oven. Chef, do you want to pull a tray out and we'll just show them what it is? We're making some meatballs. So it's just a standard like beef, egg, breadcrumbs, spices, but what we've also added is we've added some partially cooked lentils to that mix as well. So you can see these beautiful.
You can put it down here if you want.
So we're just cooking them up so that you can try them after. But there's some red lentils in there. So I'll talk about these red lentils first. So this is a kind of lentil that's commonly available here. And these are great because they cook up really, really fast and they sort of disappear. You can add them to anything, like I add them to tomato sauce to add fiber and protein. And then they just sort of like disappear and my kids don't know. Okay, can you put them back in? Yeah, thank you so much. So the thing that people don't know so much about in North America is that like you can buy lentils in many different forms. Okay, so this red lentil, what this is actually it's a green lentil, and what's been done to it is that it's been shelled and then split. So what that means is that it's going to cook faster and it's going to fall apart more easily, okay? So
that's a good bit of insight. I had no idea about that. And I eat lentils a lot, but I never knew.
So
now I know.
These lentils, so the lentils that I'm cooking today that are in here, these are sort of like, if you will, a red lentil version of what's called, in English it's called a mupde bean, or it's called urad dal. And it's actually, so this is a split urad dal. So it's a tiny little black lentil. And if you like to eat at Indian restaurants, like dal makhani that is what it's made out of, is the whole, usually it's the whole lentils, but then this is a split version of it. And then this is actually a split and shelled version of it. So what that means is that you're getting, like the color will just be consistently white and it cooks a lot faster. And these lentils are so delicious and creamy. Like I actually add them in when I make like a split pea and bacon soup, which is, not traditional to how these are used. It adds an amazing creaminess. So the other thing that I'm making is I'm gonna make in here, so we'll get it started. I'm making a mixture that you could use, like say for tacos or for anything that you would use like a sort of ground meat. Like if you're a vegetarian, there's a lot of those like fake meat substitutions, which I'm not a huge fan of because they tend to be very processed, a lot of sodium. So we're gonna use lentils, onions, toasted sunflower seeds, and mushrooms. And then that's gonna give you like a lot of texture and health, and mushrooms are also very healthy, right? So we're gonna cook some of that up for you. So I've got some onions already diced up here, and I'm gonna get them into this frying pan.
Yeah.
I can figure out how to turn this on.
So what kind of heat do you do your frying pan on?
For this, I want like a medium.
Okay.
High.
Perfect.
Yeah, so we'll get it. And we're just gonna leave it for a minute. So preheating your pan is a really important thing when you're cooking. This is a thing that I like to teach people in a cooking class, is you should preheat your pan before you add anything to it for better cooking. I'm also gonna just quickly demo an onion, because I heard that people like to have a little demo. So Here's an onion. We've got the top and the tail. That's chef terms. The tail is like the bottom, and you know it's the bottom because it's where the root was attached in the bottom. So we off with its head, we take that off, and then we make it nice and flat so it's not gonna roll around. Here's my, oh, thank you so much. It's like you know. And then we're gonna leave that together, and we're gonna cut it in half, and then we're gonna peel it. And then the reason we leave that together is so that all of the layers stay
together.
Yeah, so they don't fall apart, right? And then you've got all these beautiful lines on the onion. It's like Mother Nature planned that for us to know how to follow. So you can, depending on how much you want it, how small you want it diced, you're gonna follow those lines going across, and you're not gonna cut all the way through. Okay, you're just gonna go like that. And then once you've gotten all the way through, then you're gonna start dicing across like that. Okay, and that is the proper way.
It's a lot safer
cut
that
an
way too,
onion.
like it doesn't move around as much because it's connected by that root.
Exactly, exactly. So there you go. There's a little more diced onion. Okay,
All right.
now that my pan is heated, I'm gonna add a mild cooking oil. So we're gonna use canola. And I'm gonna know that it's hot because my oil looks shimmery. And see how it's like immediately it's shimmery. So now I know my oil is hot, because if you put cold oil into a cold pan and then you turn it on, you don't know if it's hot or not. So I'm gonna put the rest of this in here, and we're gonna let the onions cook to develop flavor. The other thing that we're gonna use in this recipe is, these are dried shiitake mushrooms. So these are a very economical way to eat and cook with mushrooms. So this is a dried shiitake mushroom, okay? And then this one I've soaked in water. You can just soak it overnight in cold water, or you can put it in warm water for about an hour. And then you can squeeze out the extra liquid, and then the liquid left over is also a beautiful broth you can use for a gravy, for a soup. You could freeze it, you can put it in the fridge for later. You don't have to use it. And then these mushrooms, they're beautiful and so meaty. And so you can get a giant bag of these mushrooms right now at Ethnic for $13. And that, like, for a home, like, you're gonna, here, I'll show you the bag actually.
Yeah, it's a huge bag.
It's a huge bag. Okay, so that's $13. Anybody who buys mushrooms at the grocery store knows that this many mushrooms, especially once they're hydrated, like if you can see how much is in there.
How do you hydrate them? Like, how long does it take?
Just in water.
Okay.
Yeah, so you could do them like overnight if you just want to be prepared. You could sit in the fridge like that for like a couple days, or just put them in warm water for about an hour to 2 hours. You'll know when it's soft, when it's hydrated, because it's soft.
Okay.
If it's not fully hydrated, like this stem will feel a little bit woody.
Okay.
So put that there.
Yeah, so it looks like the onions have heated up.
Yeah.
You have a little bit more chopping to do with the mushrooms, probably?
Yeah, Jax, do you want to chop the rest of these mushrooms for me? That would be great. You can just do them back here.
And then I'm wondering if we have, maybe this is a great opportunity for us to introduce Jessie and bring her into the conversation.
That would be great.
So I'd like to now welcome Jessie Tripp. She is a registered dietitian. And she also, so at the University of Guelph, she supports a lot of different students in her role. Her role is actually housed in the hospitality services department. And in addition to supporting students with their dietary requests or allergies, she also is involved in the Student Nutrition Awareness Program and lots of other different food initiatives on campus. So welcome, Jessie.
Thank you,
I'll let you come into the middle here.
Yeah.
I get to see the action right now.
Yeah, get in there.
Yeah. Looks great. Smells great too.
So just before we kind of go back into the cooking,
Yeah.
I wanted, Jessie, do you want to just describe a little bit more about some of your work that you do here?
Yeah, for sure. So like Rebecca said, I do supervise what's known as the Student Nutrition Awareness Program, aka SNAP. You might have seen a bit about SNAP on campus. This is a great program because it's student-led and student-facing. It's about 2 coordinators, 16 volunteers, really work to provide nutrition education to students. They also do support students with dietary restrictions and allergies, just like myself. But we work together to ensure that we're that nutrition resource for students on campus. And just generally, the mission is to help students build positive eating habits and behaviors, and have a healthy relationship with food. So yeah. And other projects and initiatives, like Rebecca mentioned, I work a lot with the managers and chefs within hospitality services, and collaborate with other groups on campus too, in terms of programming and working at the community level. So yeah,
that's great. Well, thank you for introducing that. We're going to talk a little bit more and get Jessie's feedback on building a nutritious meal and budgeting and planning. But first, I just want to turn it over to Yasi just to let us know where she's currently at.
So I want to say that when you're cooking onions, you should cook them more than you think that you need to. This is my experience from teaching a lot of cooking classes, is that the way you develop flavor is by cooking your onions a lot. You want to get lots of color in there, lots of heat. Like you can see that it's like getting a little bit brown on the bottom. That's okay. So developing flavor is like a fine balance between not hot enough and too hot. So it's about getting comfortable with things being really, really hot, and just what that means. Like just as I'm stirring, like that brown fond, as the French call it, is developing, and then I'm scraping the bottom to get it on. Okay, and I've also added dried thyme. So it's really important to toast your spices to develop flavor. A lot of people just like add it in right at the end of something. You're not getting any flavor. This is called blooming your spices when you toast them in oil. So, and I'm adding them in with the onions so that they can just keep getting super flavorful.
That's great.
I also added salt to the onions. When you add salt to a vegetable while you're frying it, it will draw a bit of the liquid out of it, will help to keep it from burning.
Okay, that's really good. So while that's still cooking, I have a question then for both Jessie and Yasi. I'm wondering, like, what are some things people should think about when they're trying to plan a menu and they're trying to figure out what to eat? So maybe Yasi, like, what is kind of your thought process that you go through when you're trying to plan a meal?
So I cook in a backwards way, which is, what do I have? What do I need to use? And what's cheap at the grocery store? If you want to, trying to figure it out freaks you out, you can just Google ingredients and put recipes. Like you could put, beet, onion, carrot, beef recipe, and it'll spit you out. That's how I cook.
I love that. Yeah.
Also, I know people don't like to hear this, but meal planning is an amazing thing. If you spend even 15 minutes once a week just making a meal plan, then it takes the thinking out of it, and then you don't end up making last minute split unhealthy decisions.
And even from that perspective too, grocery lists. I always encourage making a grocery list. Not that you're going to stick to it 100% every time, but it just helps with that accountability piece, nutritionally, like Yasi mentioned. But also, I think, too, sometimes, how often do we come home from the grocery store, realize we forgot an ingredient, and then that meal might not get made, right? So it just gives you a little bit of accountability on that side as well, to stick to, as best you can, the meal planning side of things.
So that's a really good tip. I often will end up going to the grocery store when I'm hungry, and also without a list, I end up just buying the wrong pieces.
Can I just say, I never go to the grocery store without a list. Like, the idea of going without a list puts me into, a physical panic.
I'm the same way.
And actually, I like to joke that when I die, they will find 1,000 little folded up grocery lists in every pocket that are very similar. Sometimes at the grocery store, I pull out the list and I'm like, this seems wrong, but also it seems right. It's like, oh, that's last week's list. Okay, this is
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
So then, maybe from a nutritional standpoint, if you're planning your meals for the week, or even you're like looking at building one dish, what are some of the nutritional things people should take into consideration?
Yeah. So I think generally one of the resources and guides that I encourage people, folks to think about is the balanced plate model, specifically from Canada's Food Guide, which Health Canada has developed, and it's just a great way to visualize and think about your meals when you go to plan.
And thank goodness they updated that.
Yes.
Can I just say?
Yes, from the serving sizes and rainbows and all that. I think it's important that it's more generalizable, right? And easier to understand, because what I talk about a lot with folks, I mean, I've only been in the profession for about 4 years, but prior to the newest 2019 version, it was really difficult for folks to understand what a serving size was, even with the existing guide. So I think this one is definitely much more approachable and generalized to the entire population. You just change the size of your plate, and then it's customizable. But yeah, it's not perfect, right? It's for those who know the newest version of Canada's Food Guide. It's divvied up into about half your plate fruits and vegetables, a quarter grains, and the remaining quarter protein, with an emphasis on plant-based protein, again, in keeping with today's conversation. And the thing is, I always say it's about striving and aiming to include that distribution. Okay, perfect.
So
awesome.
we all know about deglazing. You can just use whatever you have. Just use vinegar. You can also just deglaze with water. You don't have to have fancy wine. And what that does is, see that's scraping the bottom? Look, I want a little bit of water. I'm just going to add some from the sink.
Okay, I love that. That's great.
Yeah.
Keep going.
No, that was great. Thank you for filling us in. We didn't miss that important step.
Yeah.
And you know what? I didn't know that. When I think of deglazing, I honestly stereotypically think of like a wine or something.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
Like you think you have to have wine. You could just use a little bit of vinegar. You could use red wine, white wine, rice, like whatever you have.
Makes sense to
Or
where
just
it
use
comes from.
Or just use water.
Yeah. Perfect. Cool. But no, essentially it's just like striving for that distribution and using that as a guide to help plan meals. And keeping in mind your preferences, cost, of course, keeping with today's theme, and other factors, right? Like one's health, what you have on hand. There's so many other things to keep in mind when you're doing that meal planning, but from the nutrition perspective, that's one of the ones I generally recommend. Yeah.
That's great. And do you have... I was going to be way too hard. I have a question, so never mind that one.
Yeah.
But thank you. That really helps us out. And so if people wanted to learn more, can you mention what it's called again, or where they could find that resource?
Yeah, of course. So specifically Health Canada's Food Guide. I'm sure we can provide the resource afterwards. And, in terms of other evidence-based information, because I know that's something I get asked a lot about from students nowadays, is anything, that would come from evidence-based sources, peer-reviewed. So I'm biased, obviously, being a dietitian, but Dietitians of Canada is a great resource, and they actually have very much a non-clinical resource called unlockfood.ca, and that one has a lot of great resources for how to cook on a budget, or a variety of articles and things like that, right? So those are a few, but Canada's Food Guide.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And then, so you did mention that building the plate suggested you have at least half of your plate is fruits and vegetables. Quite often, fruits and vegetables can be quite expensive, and we've seen that a lot lately. Yeah. Do you have, Yasi, do you have any suggestions of good little tips?
Like frozen spinach is so good. And like those meatballs, you could add frozen spinach to those meatballs. Frozen peas are a great frozen vegetable. Buying frozen fruits, like when it comes to berries, I don't know, call me, but I think in Canada we should be eating frozen berries unless they're in season. We don't need to, because everybody knows you spend $8 on raspberries, by the time you get home they're already gone. Right?
Yeah. And there's such a misconception I think I hear from a lot of folks, even still, is the idea that somehow frozen is lesser than your fresh. But nutritionally, they're picked at their peak optimal ripeness.
Exactly.
And so the nutritional value
flash frozen, in a very high tech environment.
Exactly.
Too.
So nutritionally, especially when you talk about berries, that's an example that I actually anecdotally talk about is, you can get a big bag of no-name berries, and it'll be like, $12, $13 compared to buying fresh, and what you're getting from that, how that's spreading out the budget and extending things is really, really valuable. So,
I think it's also about planning, you know,
Yeah.
like I think one of the things we've really lost in this modern convenience culture is just about planning.
Yeah.
And processing, you know, like buy lots of strawberries when they're in season,
Yeah.
wash them and put them in the freezer,
Yeah.
you know, or like if you want to get fancy, slice them up and put them in the freezer,
Yeah.
or same with raspberries
Yeah.
when they're in season,
Yeah.
you know, like we don't need to eat everything at every time of the year
Yeah.
and just, you know, preparing and planning for things.
Yeah. And that's one of the things our chefs in hospitality services at least talk about, and Yasi might know as well from previous, is like we'll connect with different groups on or off campus, get seasonal fruits and vegetables and food, and find a way to process them, whether it's pickling, canning, those different methods. And that way it is extending the life, and it's a win-win, right? From sustainability and from a cost side. So, yeah.
Those are really great tips then to kind of think through how
Yeah.
how you
Also,
can
when
prepare.
things are on sale,
Yes.
you know, like buy a bunch of spinach and like you can make frozen spinach yourself. Onions. This is the thing that I love to teach people is like everything starts with onions, right? So when they're cheap, buy a bunch, dice them, and they keep you in the fridge for like a week,
Yeah.
2 weeks even, like in a lidded Tupperware. And then every time you're going to cook something, you've got onions that are already cut. If you're worried about that or you don't have fridge space, like you can freeze diced onions. You know, like you can
Yeah.
you freeze them sort of flat on a tray, and then once they're frozen, you put them into like a Ziploc bag or a container or whatever, and then you just take a little bit out as you need it.
Yeah. Yeah. And even, you know, thinking about the ingredients used today here, like the dried goods and even canned goods. Canned goods also get a bit of a bad rap, especially because of the sodium, excess sodium that's added. But believe it or not, if you actually rinse off most of your canned goods, you're going to be removing most of the excess sodium. So it's still an option. It's still, you know, cost effective and can still be nutritious. So.
Or buy dry.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly.
This is the other thing, you know, like it's so wasteful, and you think like, well, I'm saving time. I couldn't possibly have time to cook chickpeas. It doesn't take that long. So there's something called the quick soak method. You can use it for any kind of dried beans. And you cover it with boiling water and put a lid on it, let it sit for half an hour, and that is equivalent to soaking something for 24 hours. So any recipe that says soak your beans overnight, half an hour, and then you cook them. It doesn't take that long. I swear to God, like red kidney beans even that are quite big. Once you've done the quick soak method, then you can cook them in like, I don't know, 15 minutes and they're done. And then you've got this beautiful broth that's not full of sodium and weird additives. And you can also use that broth like in a soup. Use it to bulk up your chili. Use it for whatever.
So versatile.
Yeah. That's a great tip, and I think a
And
lot of the times,
lentils are cheap.
Yes.
they are.
Yeah.
And they cook quickly.
They're budget friendly. They're delicious, and they're like versatile. And you're showing us today too just how they can blend right in.
And I never understand why anyone would buy a canned lentil. Seriously, they cook so quickly. These red lentils that I put in the meatballs, I didn't even cook them. I just soaked them in boiling water for about an hour, and then I drained them. And like they're cooked enough. They're going to finish cooking in the meatloaf.
I think a lot of our problem too is we've become so accustomed to convenience, and we want things right away. And so I think it's thinking more. Maybe we need to spend more time talking, like as a society, about how do you plan your meals, how do you think ahead, so that you have that time.
Like give yourself the time to think about it. Like I used to teach this class to new moms or to busy professionals. Instead of waiting to think about what you're cooking for dinner when you're looking in the fridge, think about it on your drive home or think about it in the morning. Like give yourself 2 minutes to think, what am I going to make tonight for dinner while you're eating your breakfast or the day before? Even if you just think of every meal the day before, then when you get home, you know what you're doing.
That's a really good point, Even doing a quick inventory of your freezer, fridge, and pantries, too. Sometimes we might forget, and, you know, I've been guilty of that as well, and before you're heading out, you can just do a quick scan and just see what's there.
Yeah.
I just want to say a thing that I did that's a perfect example is I overloaded my pan, which is why I took half of it out. When you want to like really like develop flavor of like mushrooms and onions or any vegetable, you want to not put it too much in the pan, because then what happens is it ends up steaming, and then you're just kind of boiling it, which is a little gross. Question.
If it's overloaded, is there a certain depth you're trying to?
Yeah, like it should just be a flat layer. Less is more. Less is always more. And when we're trying to rush, we actually end up slowing ourselves down in the end. Yeah.
So yeah, you're cooking that down right now. So I know we have like about 20 minutes left. We've been talking a lot, but we can continue to keep talking if you're on track there.
Yeah, I want to just talk quickly about the spices that I put in here. So I used, one of the spices that I used is allspice. This is one of my favorite spices. It's really interesting. This spice is used in cultures all over the world. So it's used a lot in South America, Central America. It's one of the main ingredients in jerk spice. It's used in a lot of meats in the Middle East. I'm Turkish, that's my background. It's used with a lot of meat. It's used in India, in like curry spices. Like in North America, people sort of associate allspice with pumpkin spice and for desserts. But it actually has a beautiful, amazing flavor that makes it very versatile. And while it kind of pairs nicely with like cinnamon and ginger and stuff like that, it's also great with like oregano and garlic and something spicy. It is actually a pepper seed. That is what an allspice is. It's a red pepper seed that is then ground. It is not a mixture of spices. Also, we didn't have garlic, so I just used granulated garlic powder. Why not?
It's kind of impressive because you came into our lab this morning and went into our pantry and was like, what spices do you have? You kind of like figured it out on the fly.
Yeah.
How can like home cooks learn to maybe be a little bit more resourceful? What process do you go through?
You just gotta experiment. You gotta try and try again. And eventually it's like any skill, right? You have to flex those muscles. It's like, like stretching every day if you want to do the splits. If you want to be a great cook, you got to cook every day and you got to try new things. And I mean, we live in the land of the internet now. Like you can Google recipes and try different things all the time. I will say though, just because a recipe is on the internet doesn't mean that it's good. So if you follow it to the T and you're like, this is not good. Yeah, well, maybe it wasn't a good recipe. Also, food is very subjective. So what I'm gonna like and think is delicious, and what you're gonna like is different. Like I'm gonna think your food, I'm just, as an example, no offense, I'm gonna think your food is under-seasoned, and you're gonna think my food is salty.
Yeah.
And that's okay. You can't please everyone. So you just gotta try things out and, just get creative.
I like that. Yeah, and there's no one set way to do something, and don't be too afraid. I think those are
And I
good
think
things to know.
educating yourself a little bit about spices and the variety of spices and what they go well with is like a great starting point. I have this amazing book. I still reference it all the time. It's called the Spice and Herb Bible. And it's like a dictionary of spices and herbs, and I read it cover to cover like a book because I love food. Other people might be like, zoning out. But I just learned a little bit about each spices and different ways to pair them. Like cinnamon doesn't only get used in sweet things. Cinnamon is used, in Middle Eastern food, it's added to a kofta mix, like a meat mix. Cinnamon is used in a curry that's very savory and spicy. So, and figuring out what spices can, cinnamon is actually a great example of a way to add sweetness to a meal without adding sugar. Because cinnamon has this ability, it almost tricks your brain a little bit that you think something is sweet because you taste a hint of cinnamon.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome.
Interesting. No, yeah. So we've talked so far about planning meals, something to look for when we go shopping. some of the culinary techniques, but I'm wondering, another thing is that we have a really big problem with waste in our society, and sometimes things will go bad in our fridge. I think 58% of food in Canada that's produced ends up actually being wasted, which is just a mind-boggling statistic. But I'm wondering, are there any sort of tricks to go about making sure that we're using everything that we purchase, so we're getting the full worth of all of our budget on food? I don't know if Yasi, you want to start, and then if you have some suggestions as well, Jessie.
Yeah, of course.
I want to say, you know, like, again, less is more, and planning.
Yep.
You want to plan things. Don't just buy things because they're cheap or because you like it. Like, have a plan for it. And, you know, cook in the way that I cook, where it's, instead of being like, I'm going to make this thing today, be like, what do I need to make in order to use everything in my fridge?
Yeah.
And also, anything that's about to go off, like vegetable-wise, can be frozen and then turned into soup stock later.
Yep.
Like, make your own broths. We have a buck courtesy of Jax. Jax is actually, they live with me as well, and they are really into making soup. So we have a bucket in the freezer with a lid, and like all your vegetable scraps or any vegetables that are like, oh, we're not going to get to cooking this, we just throw it in there, and then we make like a veggie broth.
Yeah. So using food scraps, and we were just talking about that actually, Rebecca and I recently, and it's so important, right? And I think that's, again, the idea that for some people it's the first reaction is to throw it out, but getting creative, like Yasi was saying before, about challenging yourself and thinking, how can I reuse this? To that note too is reusing leftovers. I've talked with a lot of folks recently who maybe just don't like the taste of leftovers, or their automatic reaction again is, oh, I've got this surplus, I'm just going to toss it. Well, there's this concept again from Canada's Food Guide, the cook once, eat twice. And it's the idea of just repurposing that leftover. Maybe you have isolated ground beef from a taco one night, and you don't want to have tacos again, but maybe you can make a shepherd's pie the next night.
100% that goes into the planning thing, right?
Exactly.
So when I make my meal plan, there's usually one day a week where it says leftovers.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
At least one day. Sometimes, like, by the time Friday comes, like, oh, fuck, we have so many leftovers. Like, I'm not cooking.
Yeah.
We got lots of stuff. Or, like, if you are cooking something, cook more and use it two ways, you know, like brown 2 pounds of ground beef, and then make pasta one night and shepherd's pie the next day, or freeze some so that it's ready for a quick dinner.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it can definitely be intentional too, not just like a happy accident, like, oh, now I've got this leftover. Like, like you said, definitely do things in batches and think about how that additional yield can help things go further.
Yeah,
for sure.
or like on Sunday night, you roast a chicken and then you cut it all off the bone. On Tuesday, you boil that carcass up and you make a chicken soup.
Yep.
And then on Thursday, you know, you've got leftover chicken soup that you make chicken pot pie with, you know?
That's great.
Also, a thing that we do in my house, depending on how many people live in your house, freezing meals in sort of a single serving size is great. So on a night when, you know, you're busy or whatever, you're just having soup for dinner, like soup and a grilled cheese, or soup and toast is a perfectly balanced meal. I think also, like, we live in this like land of excess, right? Where it's like a meal has to be like a 5-course thing with this and that. A meal can just be soup and toast, right?
Yeah, for sure. You can do a lot with a little. Nutritionally and, you know, for every other aspect, right? So yeah, it's a really good point.
And also use your sniffer. Use your nose. Like, if it smells okay, it's probably okay. You know?
Expiry dates often.
Oh my God, these are a lie. Use your nose. Like, you know if that milk is bad.
Yeah. And it's not going to kill you.
No.
If you,
Especially things like, say, like yogurt, sour cream, cheese. These are literally fermented, aged products. You know, they're not going bad. Like that yogurt, like, I have eaten yogurt way past its due date. You know, like, you're gonna know. You're gonna open it up, there's gonna be mold on it or like a weird discoloration.
Well, and the best before too, it's about quality, right? Like the best before versus expiry. So it's a really good point to bring up is, you know, and that's a conversation I have with students often, is distinguishing between those two and what that means for food. But
because best before is that, like, it's best before. It doesn't mean garbage after. You know, but I think it's really been marketed because I'm just gonna for a second here talk about how our food system is set up for profit and not for actual quality or for people, right? So it's been designed so that you'll throw something away and go out and spend more money. That's how our food system is set up, is for making money. And I can tell you, as somebody who works in food, that food is not profitable. The only way to make money off of food is to exploit the land and exploit people. That's how people make a profit. That's how grocery stores make a profit. They mark up the prices, but did the people who work in the grocery store get a raise? No. I'll stop because you guys know. You guys know. And we live in an abundant world. There were times not that long ago, and there are places in the world where people access all their food locally. We can actually do that. You know, this idea of scarcity is like, that is a story that we are told. We live in an abundant world.
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, those are really important words. I also I don't have access to the Zoom chat, but I just did get a message, and apparently there's lots of folks online that are sharing a lot of similar challenges or opinions, and one of them particularly Food Distribution Association in Thunder Bay. So, you know, I think like a lot of it can also, we're all going through a lot of these struggles, and sometimes it can be really hard to break out of that silo.
Yep.
And, you know, you need kind of like a full group of people to kind of work on these challenges to be able to change the food system. It's not an easy thing, and it's going to take a long time.
And food is meant to be shared.
Yep.
You know, I would say like food is like the first, you know, expression of love that you experience as a human being. Somebody cared enough for you to keep you alive by feeding you.
Yep.
You know, and food, to me, like food is love. It's to be shared. It's really hard to cook for one person. You know, like share with your neighbors, share with your friends.
Breaking bread, right?
Breaking bread. It's really hard to make one portion or two portions even. I have a hard time even with 4. But that's me.
No, collaboration is definitely important, and that's something I think lends itself well to being in the university, is having various campus groups, or even those off campus, right, to be able to work with and share resources and knowledge, and it's so important.
And I think the thing that's been really interesting at the University of Guelph is because there's a community hub. There's been a lot of engaging with students and trying to get them inspired and empowered as well too. Whether it's through your SNAP program or the affordable campus food market on a sliding scale. There's a lot of students who are really passionate about making sure everyone has access to food on campus, and they're really trying to find their own ways to solve that, which I don't know if that's great to see them doing that, but it shows that that we need more work being done on this for sure.
It's a double-edged sword, right? Like the way to look at it, for sure.
So Yasi, we're already almost coming up to the end of our hour.
Okay.
I don't know if what you're thinking about timing to show the rest of the dish, or we talk through it.
Yeah, this is just about done. So I've got my onions with the beautiful flavor developed, and I've got these lentils that I cooked. So I'm just doing it all a little bit separately, because then you end up with like a nicer product. The thing is with cooking vegan food, you want to create texture. You want to really think about texture, because otherwise everything ends up like mushy paste. Sunflower seeds are also a great substitute for any recipe that calls for like pine nuts or walnuts that are like, I love
crazy
walnuts.
Expensive.
I can't afford them. So, you know, toasted sunflower seeds are very affordable. Also, we live in Canada. They're grown here, right?
That's great. And the nutritional value of nuts.
And seeds.
Is important as well too.
And I think immediately about allergies too, right? Like a lot of vegan dishes, like Yasi was saying, include walnuts and other nuts, which is great. But for folks who have tree nut and nut allergies, especially again in my role, that's something I always think about, is making it as inclusive as possible too.
So this is done, and I'll just give it like a quick taste. And I'm also gonna, my one last money-saving tip is olive oil. Don't cook with olive oil. Unless you live in Italy or Greece on an olive grove, don't cook with it. Because when you cook with it, you lose all the flavor. And there's probably like carcinogenic things, like you're not supposed to cook it at too high of a temperature or whatever. When you want an olive oil flavor, just add it at the end. So I'm gonna actually just add a little bit. So then we get that really nice, earthy, like olive oil flavor. And also, it's good for you, right? This is a good fat, especially when you don't heat it.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's very,
So we're gonna have this
those
beautiful
unsaturated fats.
flavor in here, and we haven't, you know, it's like I say, like it's like taking $20 bills and throwing them in the garbage. When you have a recipe that says like sear your chicken in olive oil, who wrote that recipe? To me, that's a pointer. Either the person like lives again on an olive grove in Italy, or that's not a very good recipe, because anybody who's telling you to sear your chicken in olive oil is maybe, you know, maybe they're a little confused. I don't know. There's probably like nonas
totally
or
fine
Turkish
to
grandmas
substitute in.
rolling over in their grave right now. But I said it. I said what I said.
So we have one question.
What do you recommend for cooking oil then?
So I would use like a canola oil or sunflower oil, avocado oil, coconut oil. What do you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, any of the above. I think
What's the newest information?
Well, and that's the thing. There's a lot of information out there, and that's something I talk about with people all the time. Is just finding what works best for you. Again, from a price perspective, preference, allergy, etc. I think all the above that you mentioned are great. Avocado oil is great as well because it does have some unsaturated. I mean, the oils in general are going to be an unsaturated fat, but you're getting some additional nutrients from the avocado oil too.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
That's great. And then how would you normally serve it? Like just like that, or do you turn it in? What is the plan here? It's
So
delicious
this is
the way that
kind
it
of
is.
like what I would use for like a taco filling.
Love that.
You could also mix this with some kind of cooked meat, and you're like bulking it up, right? Instead of it having to be like chicken, you know, enchiladas or chicken tacos or beef tacos, like mix it with this, and then you only need to use a little bit of meat, and the rest is this.
It smells delicious
Yeah,
too. A lot
it
of
really
flavor. It smells like
Yeah.
Jax, do you want to put that into cups for me? And then everybody can get a little
perfect.
sample.
So
You can just come over here, yeah.
So as we serve and we wrap up, that was a very quick hour with a lot of insights. I want to ask you, Jessie, if people wanted to learn more about some of your work or the initiatives you're involved in, where could they find that or learn more?
Perfect. So I'm going to spew out some words and phrases, so for folks they can find it afterwards. But so the Student Nutrition Awareness Program that I mentioned before, aka SNAP, they do have a pretty good social media presence. So if you're on Instagram, for example, you can look up at SNAP U of Guelph. Alternatively, you can email them at snap@uofguelph.ca. So it's basically just the inverted. Otherwise, on the Hospitality Services website, I do have a landing page within the nutrition section, so you can always check out more about me and my services or just what I do on campus and for the department. My email is jtrupp@uofguelph.ca. So jtrupp@uofguelph.ca.
And I always often find Jessie wandering around checking out different food activities.
I'm physically everywhere on campus as well, just as a heads up. Yeah.
She's great.
Yeah.
And then Yasi, with community food, so first of all, is there a way for people to get involved who are here locally? And then for those who might be tuning in from further abroad, how can they learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, you can check out our website at FEWD.ca, FEWD.ca. We're always looking for volunteers to help us serve or in the kitchen. We're also soliciting financial donations right now. Please tell your friends with money. We want to keep this program going. And yeah, so for people on the interwebs, hi. You can make financial donations online. You can recommend us for catering to any of your local friends. And yeah.
Tune in.
Yeah, you can email me through the website, even just to talk about things.
And your Instagram.
Instagram, yes. Also the Instagram at Community Food. That's a good way to sort of keep up to date with what's going on with us. We have lots of...
You even have do you have a dinner tonight?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
as well, like you were just stop.
Yep, we're serving in the ward. We're serving in the
Oh,
ward tonight at
that's
Double
awesome.
Rainbow Cafe. Yeah, it's burrito-bowls.
Ooh, okay, so if everyone in Guelph, we know where we're going for dinner tonight. That's great. But once again, I just want to thank you, Yasi, for being here, sharing all your insights, as well as you, Jessie, bringing that nutritional side of things to the conversation was really helpful. I feel like this was just the start of a conversation about nutrition and budgeting and planning. So hopefully we will have lots more on the go, because I know we had probably like 20 other discussion topics to cover in this hour. But I want to thank everyone for tuning in here today. Deep Dish Dialogues is a monthly event series that is free and open to anyone to join. It is organized by the School of Hospitality, Food and Tourism Management and the Aero Food Institute, and we've got a huge team of people who help us put on these events, so I'd like to say thank you to them, and we will see everyone then in April. So thank you.
And come try a sample.
Yeah. Sorry for people on the internet that you can't taste it.
So now